Hello and welcome to the Literary Lair. It's our 150th episode! And as such, I'm gonna wait a few seconds to see if it's gonna be interrupted by anyone. Great Scott, Michael! Alright, what are you doing here? You know, this better not be another crisis. What do you mean? I'm here for the crossover. What crossover? The 150th episode spectacular crossover. The present crossing over with the future. I have it all written down in my incursion record. The crossover for the ages. The most elaborate video you'll ever make. Hey, Michael, I was wondering if you knew where, I'll ask you about it later. Anyway, as I was saying, it's all written down here. And... What's wrong? Oh, crap. No. This isn't the right episode, is it? Well, you know how our handwriting is really bad, right? Yep. I'm supposed to either be at the 750th episode or the 1050th episode. We make it to that many episodes? I've said too much. I've gotta go, Iota, get me out of here! It's also the final episode of Sequel Month, and this episode is, of course, a sequel to the 100th episode, which I released only 2 years ago, in which I tackled a book written by my main inspiration for becoming a reviewer, Lewis Lovehog. And that one was a trip. I remember it like it was yesterday. Wait a minute, he defeats the evil in Bloodraven's head by turning into Gur from Invader Zim? What? And then he defeats the darkness by recreating the living spaces from pop culture, like Friends and Evil Dead? I feel like there was something that wasn't entirely accurate about that flashback. Anyway, the Angel Armor series was self-published by Lewis when he was in high school, and the sequel was released just a year after the original, which, considering that sequels written by professional authors can take years to come, is pretty damn commendable. Though maybe that short gap between entries isn't the blessing I think it is. We'll find out. The first book's title was extremely on the nose, essentially summarizing the main character, it being titled Just a Boy, likely a reference to the fact that the titular boy becomes the Jesus figure of an alien religion. This book's title is a lot more subtle, being Angel Armor: The Cassandra Conflict.
Well, we're all here for the crossover.
Hey Mike, congrats on the milestone!
Yeah, congrats, man.
The traffic getting here was a nightmare.
Ah, jeez, not this again. I just finished having this conversation with myself.
They say you're not supposed to do that.
Anyway, there's not going to be a crossover.
Uh-huh. But what about Internet Reviewer Law article?
Article 74, Section 6, Subsection 1. If a reviewer hasn't done a proper crossover since the 100th episode, the 150th episode must be a crossover. But that one comes with a loophole. If I'm unable to properly perform a crossover at this time, I can defer it to the 200th episode, which I'm gonna do.
Aw, man.
You mean I put on pants for nothing?
We all put on pants for nothing.
You know, it's really unfair that you can use those laws to make us do stuff, and then you just go ignore them yourself.
I'm not ignoring them. I just know the loopholes. There's a difference.
You know, we're still not done with that Ghostbusters crossover, right?
Oh yeah, we do need to do that. One video at a time. Thanks for dropping by, though. I like getting all my cameos out of the way at the beginning. Really hope that's not foreboding. Anyway, I know that this has been a really long prologue, but, milestone episode, and I haven't really had collaborative stuff in any of my other videos this year, so I think I've earned this. But, like all Sequel Month episodes, we gotta have a recap. Previously on Angel Armor, Just a Boy. Lewis Williamson, regular teenager, finds a strange gauntlet at an antique store and is thrust onto the far-off world of Sin and becomes the Linkara, the Jesus figure of one of the major religions on Sin. But another faction, commanded by the Darkness, is out to take over Sin and destroy the Linkara. Lewis and his band of friends, including Indau, a Linkaran priestess, and Catgirl, Lithmanar, Master Thief, and White Raven, a reformed former Darkness member with a dark past as Blood Raven, responsible for a famous massacre. After a long journey of Lewis learning to use the gauntlet, coming to grips with his place in the Linkaran faith, and Indau doing some less than priestessly things, the Darkness is defeated, but to everyone on Sin, Lewis sacrificed his life as well. In reality, Lewis was instead thrust backwards in time to an earlier point in Sin's history, which was referenced throughout the book as the previous sighting of the Linkara, which is where our hero is left at the start of the next novel. Anyway, let's get right into the episode and see if the second self-published novel is as surprisingly solid as the first one was. This is the Cassandra conflict. The cover is, well, it's definitely different from the first one. I have no verification for this, and I don't feel like bothering Linkara to ask, considering that he's busy with that Contest of Champions thing, but I can only assume that the drawing was either done by a friend or possibly commissioned online. It's what I'd do if I was self-publishing, and using that assumption, it's actually really good. It's Lewis and a dragon, which factor into the book a lot during Lewis's journey in Sin's past. My only issue with it is that there's a lot of white space under the dragon. Maybe if the dragon was bigger, it wouldn't be as noticeable. Other than that, we have the title and author in the same font as the last book, and it's not perfect, but for a self-published book, this cover is better than covers I've seen for actual licensed material with money behind it. So, kudos on the cover. And I really like the side-eye that Lewis is giving the reader. Anyway, let's get to the story. We pick up where the last book left off, with Lewis trapped in the past in the midst of a years-long war with the Terrafell Arbiters, while Indau, Raven, and Lithmanar think he's dead. Lewis joins the army fighting because, in addition to being sent back, he also has a history book with him that details how the war ends, and because it takes a long time from when he is and results in thousands more casualties, Lewis wants to put a stop to it right then and there, which he has a chance to do, because of his skill when he arrived and the fact that he slew a dragon, gets him put in charge of a military unit, formerly run by his new lieutenant, Jordan. Back in the present, White Raven wants to start rounding up all the former servants of the Darkness because the Darkness itself might be gone, but as us Star Wars fans know, you can't take down an evil organization just by destroying their leader, regardless of what Power Rangers would have you believe. But Indau starts antagonizing her because she misses Lewis and still hates Raven for her past actions. And to make matters worse, taking down the Dark Knights is easier said than done, because Mira, the Dark Knight who coerced Indau into sex in exchange for the cure to Lewis's disease, and then later on raped her, has returned and is taking the Darkness's place as the leader of the Dark Knights. Lewis butts heads with Jordan in the past as he starts going on a reckless crusade to avert the future casualties by attempting to change events where he is, which leads to him getting captured and having Jordan and the team grow increasingly dissatisfied with his command style. After getting captured by Mira and White Raven betraying them to the darkness, Indau Lithmanar, Indau's father Garrick, and General Javak learn, thanks to two Linkaran priests, Cheramis and Trado, that Lewis was sent to the past, and so they begin their quest to figure out the temporal transposition spell so that they can get Lewis back to help them fight against Mira, as the remainder of their armies try desperately to take down Mira and the Dark Knights. Jeramis and Trado figure out the temporal spell, but because it's not quite exact, they volunteer to go alone, as to ensure that no one is put into unnecessary danger. They activate the spell, leaving Indau, Garrick, and Lithmanar behind as Mira starts to get the upper hand, thanks to doing a similar maneuver to something that the good guys did in the last book, with the Dark Knights giving all their power to Mira so that she can take on the army in one fell swoop, capturing Garrick as well, who is approached by some sort of spirit or ghost named Thesia while he's locked up. Lewis, meanwhile, is given a lesson in humility and helped to understand that he can't stop all the evil in the world, the so-called Cassandra conflict named after the Greek myth Cassandra. The Terrafell Arbiters also come back to destroy Lewis's army, though he manages to fight them off. Trado and Jeramis attempt to study the spell further, since Lewis wants to bring his army back with them into the future, and not just himself, which is easier said than done, and to make matters worse, as Lewis and his army retreat across the land, they come across a familiar cabin. Not that one. Actually, it's Rain Vengdry's cabin from the first book, which isn't all that strange, since her ancestors could have built it centuries ago, but Lewis notices a strange anachronism. Rain's gravesite is next to the cabin, which quickly vanishes into thin air. Trado and Jeramis postulate that the usage of the temporal spell causes time disruptions, which will hopefully be fully reversed once they return home. And if they don't, they'll just have to call in the legends to take care of it. The Arbiters return for another battle. Geez, these guys don't know when to give up. But they gain the upper hand on Lewis, knocking him out of the sky despite his armor. While unconscious, Lewis sees a dark part of his subconscious, which taunts him, calling him worthless and questioning if he's just gonna give up 'cause it's hard. Which sounds amazingly familiar, but I cannot figure out where I've seen that before. On an unrelated note, Iota, step up our game on tracking down the man in black. I still can't figure out where I've seen that scene before. Anyway, he wakes up empowered and decides to bluff the Arbiters using the same bluff that Kirk used against Balok in the Corbomite maneuver and used again in the Deadly Years, which works, surprisingly. Raven confronts Garrick in the cell, revealing that she never actually betrayed them. She knew that Mira had to be stopped, and there's no better way to do it than from the inside. Even Indau was in on it, but she had to keep everyone else out of the loop so Mira wouldn't suspect anything. Though Mira's not nearly that stupid and figured out the plan, coming into Garrick's cell to take Raven prisoner as well, planning to execute them publicly the next day. While traveling with the unit, a shadow creature attacks Lewis and does something similar to what Lewis, Indau, and Lithmanar did with Raven in the last book, though it's just the shadow creature entering his mind. The shadow creature taunts Lewis and shows him his friends Lithmanar, Javak, Garrick, laughing at him and telling him how worthless he is. Lewis is almost beaten down by that display, but off to the side he sees someone else. Indau, and she's not laughing at him. She cares about him, and she's the one person Lewis wants to see more than anything, and seeing her is enough to power him up so that he can take down this creature the only way he knows how. Since it's his mind, he has control over what he can do, and he attacks with the creature's worst nightmare, Freddy Krueger, which manages to be enough to defeat the creature and allow Lewis to manifest a lightsaber to dismember it. Which is... Wait a minute. That's exactly how Linkara defeated Freddy in the Dream State during the Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash review. Just with less 90s kid. We didn't have the budget for Linkara, did we?
You barely have the budget for me.
Fair enough. Wait a minute. Who are you?
Does it matter?
I guess not. Alright, let's hear the spiel.
Spiel? You think you have a budget for writers?
Then what are you doing here?
Oh, I'm just biding my time. Which, should Should be up about now.
Anyway, they activate the spell as Lewis's unit begins charging against the enemy, one of Jordan's men relieving her of command and sending her to the future with Lewis. Raven laments not killing Mira when she had the chance, but she's worried about a possible power vacuum, like what happened after Sledge's disappearance in Dino Charge. But right before Garrick and Raven are publicly executed, Lewis returns to the future and just knocks Mira into a swamp, and that's that. They win. Lewis demands that the remaining Dark Knights simply live out their lives in peace and not bother anyone, and Indow and Lithmanar get to town, and Indow sees Lewis, and it's over. Apart from an epilogue where Lewis reunites with the group, and that ghost that Garrick saw earlier meets with the Terrafell Arbiter's leader Rohak in the past, that's the end of the book. We'll be right back with more of the show. And we're back. The characters are all really well written. Not a shock considering that they were like that in the first book. Indow, Lithmanar, Garrick, Javak, Raven, they all act exactly the way that they were established. Even the part with Indow and Raven plotting against Mira, I honestly didn't think that Indow was in on the plan, though I figured that Raven was planning a coup. That was a really good twist, considering that Indow antagonizing Raven, despite her turn to good, is totally in character for Indow, so the fact that it was part of Indow working against Mira was brilliant. And Mira is a decent replacement for the Darkness. She was the secondary antagonist from the first book, so that she'd show up and rally the Dark Forces makes a lot of sense. And while she's not quite as evil as she was in the last one, because she doesn't rape anyone in this book, she's still really evil. Though her method of defeat leaves something to be desired. I'll get into that later. Lewis has a lot of introspection and all hope is lost moments throughout the entire book. A lot of I'm just a kid moments a la Steven Universe, though done years before Steven Universe existed, so good on Lewis for doing that narrative first. Though maybe he has too many. It's like most of the book is either Lewis being reckless and stupid in the name of saving everyone, or moping because he's tired and sick of being a god figure. I mean, I get it, but it slows down the plot, and I'd rather have it had been reckless until he has his sad, sick moment and kicks those feelings back to save the day. That's not to say that he's not a snarky action movie one-liner guy anymore. He has a lot of funny moments, like giving his name as Lister of Smeg to the Terrafell Arbiters. I admit that's probably what I would do if I ever had to give an alias, pick something from a TV show. I really liked Jordan, Lewis's lieutenant from his unit. Jordan is the most competent person in the entire book, and I am so happy that she gets to come back in the next one and doesn't just die in the past. I am really excited to see how she factors into the next book. Plus, by having a companion from the distant past, Lewis might have just become the Doctor. I also like that we don't just indiscriminately kill all the Dark Knights once their leader is gone. They're evil, of course, but Lewis has shown to be able to defuse situations without needing to kill most of the time, so that's good. And Raven was one of the Dark Knight's most evil, and she got to redeem herself, so I like that everyone else gets to be spared from just getting killed. Speaking of villains, the Terrafell Arbiters are stupid. They just keep showing up to get their asses kicked or bluffed away by Lewis. Even their leader Rohak is an idiot, though he seems to be the bad guy going into the next book, so we'll see if he gets better. Because of the fact that the group is split, there's a lot of jumping around, less so than there was in the first book. We've got Lewis in the past and is constantly getting captured and antagonizing the bad guys, Indow and Lithmanar rushing around trying to stay one step ahead of Mira's forces, Garrick spends a lot of the book captured, and Raven is trying to figure out the best method to stop Mira, but spare the other Dark Knights. And I thought that the method of build up to the ending, where Mira basically grows so utterly powerful that it's almost like she can't be defeated, and that was really damn effective because they needed Lewis to come back, so you were constantly like, come on Lewis, use the spell, get back to the future. But then we just have Lewis show up at the end to pretty much flicker away and wrap everything up neatly. What I'm saying is that the ending was way too rushed. We have all this build-up, and then it just sort of ends really fast. The last book was all build-up until the final battle. The stakes got bigger and bigger until Lewis defeated the darkness and all was won. This one has a lot of the same build-up, but then it just ends. I think the problem is that Mira was shown to be almost as powerful, if not more powerful and cunning than the darkness, but she got defeated so easily. It feels like Linkara just kept writing and couldn't figure out how to end it, so he just rushed it out, figuring that he'd know how to end it in the next book. But if it is resolved in the next book, then I'll reevaluate it when I read it. But as it stands, it's an unsatisfying ending. Other than the ending, the book is action-packed, and there's a lot of really well-written fight scenes and comedic scenes, and the pacing doesn't feel off until the ending, which is like the last 2 chapters. I also feel like we didn't necessarily need that scene with the shadow creature. I feel like the Terrafell Arbiters or the Dark Knights could have cast some sort of spell that did the same thing, and it'd have factored into the main plot. The idea of the shadow creature causing Lewis to go into a dream state wasn't bad. It's just that it feels disconnected from everything else going on and feels extraneous. The shadow creature is just defeated, and that's it. If it was supposed to be the darkness foreshadowing its rise to power in the first book, it didn't come across to me. I mean, what was Lewis thinking?
He was thinking with science, of course.
Really?
I don't know, I didn't write the damn books.
Then what are you doing here?
Just testing out a new device that I plan to mass produce and market to internet reviewers.
What is it?
It's a device that pinpoints the perfect moment for a person to barge into a review to do a cameo based on comedic potential.
Wow, how does it work?
Why, with science, of course!
Ha! I finally managed to create something before you did.
Oh, shut up, you charlatan.
Wait a minute, aren't you guys friends?
Yes? No. It's complicated. It depends what origin story is using this week.
So are you the clone one, the Schlumper one, or the Spoony one?
Look, don't confuse things. It's perfectly simple. Ever since the plot told...
And the cameo stopped being funny a minute and a half ago. I guess it's still got a few bucks.
Other than that, we have a lot of the same type of quirks from the first book. A lot of the harsh language and the way it's used is definitely a tell that a teenager wrote the book. Though thankfully there are no sex scenes, at least involving Lewis, which I am very grateful for. Though I am sad that I didn't get to reuse my Marvin Gaye joke from the 100th episode. The book is good, but not quite as good as the first one. That one was a straightforward plot, and despite having a lot of weird first-time author quirks, it was an enjoyable story. This one, it has a lot of the same issues, but I didn't like it as much. Maybe it was because the book was so spread out with the plot, or maybe it was because of the unsatisfying ending. It's like, when I finished the first book, I was not necessarily blown away, but I was pumped and excited about the story being over. This one ended so fast that my reaction was more like, that was it? I do recommend it, but only if you really like the first one and are invested in the story. Obviously, it's not a good starting point and doesn't really stand on its own because it's part of a series and it's right in the middle of a series. But if you hated the first book, and based on looking at years-old reviews online, a lot of people did, you're not gonna like this one. The first one is a lot more solid. That's not to say that this book doesn't show improvement. It does. But the improvement doesn't make up for the crazy pacing and unsatisfying ending. So I guess that quick turnover between books wasn't a blessing. This one could have done with staying in the oven a tad longer. And that was Angel Armor, the Cassandra conflict. Was it good? Yes, but it's rougher than the first one. The characters are all used properly, and everyone has the time dedicated to them. But between Lewis's back and forth with his emotions and Mira's one-hit KO at the end, this book doesn't quite pack the emotional punch that the first one did. Yes, I felt happy when Indao and Lewis were reunited, but there wasn't a lot of reuniting because right when they got together, the book was over. Am I interested in what happens next? The sequel teasing at the end did make me interesting, so we might take a look at the third Angel Armor book sooner rather than later. Who knows? Anyway, that was the 150th episode. While it's not quite a milestone like the ones with double zeros in it, it's a big occasion, and it also helps that this also serves as my big end-of-year video. 2017 was not great for the world, but I made a lot of awesome videos this year, so if anything, I'm coming out of this year excited to see what's next. What will we see next year and in the next 150 episodes? Definitely more licensed material. We've got a new theme month coming in June. We've got this show's 6th anniversary in March. We'll have some tie-in stuff with the big releases, and hopefully more collaborations. The channel's been a little lonely lately. I really do appreciate all of you that are subscribed, and even those of you who don't want to subscribe and just check in every so often to see if I posted anything new. Though, you should subscribe, it's just easier that way. And hit the bell icon so you never miss a video. If you've got comments or complaints about the video, feel free to put them in the comment section below. I do read all of them, even if I don't reply. Sometimes I just can't think of a snappy response. And if you've enjoyed this episode, show it to your friends and share it around the internet. And maybe consider supporting the show on Patreon. See you next time for the first video of 2017. Here's to the new year, and may she be a damn sight better than the last one, and may we all get what we want out of it before it's over. See you next year. Fair enough.
Wait a minute! Who are you?